All right, Core. I am sorry we're having to do our professional development like this. It's a little bit of a compromise because I still might be positive for COVID at the time where I should be presenting this. So, maybe this will be easier. We can pass it along to other people who might be interested in something like this. But the topic for our professional development today is on the American work environment, work ethics, American work expectations. And I'm going to try to cover a lot. I'm going to try to not make this boring or just like lots of stories. And so I might move really quickly. So hang on with me. If I look up, it's because I got my notes right above me. And so I'm going to try to just run through this quickly and give you some hopefully helpful tips to better understand American employers, where they're coming from, and what the expectations are with American work ethic, and why. So I'm going to start by saying there's a huge range that varies drastically based on a lot of different things. It could be based on the industry, the managers, the company culture, all of those kinds of things can really make a big difference in what I'm about to tell you. So, take it with a grain of salt to some extent. I guess weigh it is for what it's worth. But hopefully this gives you more insight. The other thing too I want to shed light on is a lot of the scary parts of American business or American businesses have to do with misunderstanding the system of business that Americans are coming from. And it is a very different system. I'll just say that right up front. The American system is a free market capitalistic system. And so how it operates, why it operates, how it succeeds is very different than the Tunisian system or European system, even for that matter, France. The objectives and how they do business, how they incentivize companies is very different. In a free market in a free market capitalistic system, the focus really, it should be, it's not always, it should be on really benefiting and helping small businesses. Now, there's a lot of reasons as to why and how that helps. Some of the quick ones are it gives everybody opportunities to start small businesses. If it's accessible and it's helpful, more people have the opportunity to do it. Small businesses, if they're helped and they're sustained, they can grow and create more revenue, more economic activity, velocity of money, more jobs, all of that kind of stuff. And so small businesses are seen as kind of the underpinning, the engine of the American economy. When small businesses are able to run and operate and grow in a healthy way and make easy, good decisions for the business, it helps the local economy, the regional economy, and even the national economy when you kind of conglomerate all of the small businesses. So that is why in a free market system, the focus really is on benefiting and helping small businesses. And this is part of what makes America a really great country and lots of opportunities is you don't need a lot of money to start your own business that can then grow and become something. And there's a lot of support from the government and even banks to help you do that well. Now, I'm going to jump into a couple misconceptions that hopefully are kind of fun, but some things that I would like to kind of help break down and reconstruct a correct understanding or more accurate portrayal of Americans. So I've heard from a lot of people, not just Tunisians, that most Americans are millionaires. This is very far from the truth. Very far from the truth. In fact, the opposite is very true, and I think a lot of people don't know this. I've been to places in America that are more poor, more impoverished, whole towns, than a lot of the places in Tunisia. Not every place in Tunisia, maybe not like a Shanini, but I would not say very far from Shanini and Tatooine. And that's in America. So a recent statistic that was pulled from 2020, this was a study that was done, 37.25 million Americans live below the poverty line in America. 37.25 million Americans. That's more than 10% of the American population. Why? America has a lot of opportunity, like lots of opportunity. The really easy answer, the most straightforward answer is a lot of these people, I would say 99.9%, just don't want to work, or they don't want to work hard. That's really what it comes down to. I know people on both ends of the spectrum, and I can tell you very honestly, there are this many people that are below the poverty line because they don't want to work. Getting work is not hard in America. Getting stable work that can put you above the poverty line is very easy. You could go work at McDonald's and probably get out of poverty. And so the fact that there are this many people in poverty is a reflection that there are this many people that don't want to work or don't want to work hard. And this is just my experience, who I know. It's anecdotal, but also based on the statistics. But this is the why there are people. And there are people like this in every country. It's not just in one country or another. The difference is in America, if you don't work and you don't have money already, you're not going to do all right. You're going to need a lot of help. And that's, if I didn't explain this already, the poverty line is basically the government saying you need at least this much to survive in America. Not just, live and be okay, be middle class. The poverty line is you need this much to live. And so there's almost 10% of Americans living below that. Interesting. Very interesting. On the flip side, so that's kind of more the poverty side. On the flip side, I would say some interesting stuff about the wealthy. There's a couple studies recently that have been done, and I would be surprised if this isn't similar to statistics globally, but specifically in America, over 80%, some statistics go into the mid-90s of the percents of people, but at least somewhere between 80 and 90% of American millionaires are self-made millionaires. What does that mean? Meaning they did not inherit the wealth, they did not win it from like a lottery or something like that. They're people who worked really hard, earned money, probably invested, because that usually is kind of how you get up into the millionaire status, as working hard and investing. And that is over 80%, somewhere between 80 and 90% is probably the real statistics of millionaires in America. These are the wealthy people. Now, what does this tell you then about wealthy people, at least in America? They've worked hard, they've had to earn and invest, and they did not just inherit their money, by and large. And I know a lot of these people. I know people from both ends of the spectrum, so I can speak really honestly about both ends of the spectrum. All of the wealthy people I know in America, and I know a couple that are pretty wealthy, are extremely generous, extremely hardworking, but they also really value the cost of money. And they know what a dollar or a dinar, for example, is worth, because they've had to work really, really hard for it. So they're usually not extremely flippant with their money. A lot of American millionaires are pretty conservative with their money. They're not flashy. They're not buying, really expensive cars and blowing all their money. A lot of times they're more conservative. The other thing that's really interesting is most of the time they really value other people who are trying to earn money and do hard work. And they will pay people extra to incentivize that, encourage that, because they've kind of probably had to do the same thing. So, kind of a quick overview of America, some things maybe you did not know. I'm going to get into some general comments about why work in America is very highly valued. Now, this is my opinion. I think there are two really critical things that have shaped American work and American work ethic. The first, I'm not going to focus a lot on, is the fact that America primarily is built of immigrants. Most Americans are immigrants from countries that were seeking, religious freedom, or were trying to, flee a country from a dictator to make a better life for themselves. And we still have immigrants all the time. There are still first generation, second generation families in America that have this story. And they're bringing with them a passion and a work ethic because of what they've fled. But this is what America was really built on, is these people who left their countries, had nothing, and had to completely restart in a country where there's not the ease of some things already there. And so what you have is these pilgrims, these people who had to build everything from the ground up. And that kind of instilled a work ethic that I think got passed along generationally. So that, I think, is kind of the very basis of kind of American work ethic. But I think there was something that was bigger that reshifted it in a more unique way, in more modern era, and that is the Great Depression. The Great Depression was a really significant time in American history. So it was kind of in the late 1910s, early 1920s. There were a lot of problems, basically, but there was a huge economic meltdown. World War I kind of made all this worse, but tons and tons, by far and large, the majority of American families suffered through this time. My grandparents were all alive at this time, and so I've gotten to hear their stories of what it was like and what happened. And most of my grandparents were probably middle class or lower middle class. Most of them were immigrant families. On my mom's side, they were Polish immigrants. And on my dad's side, they were German immigrants and Irish immigrants, Scottish immigrants. But during this time, families who were pretty well off, coming from a time of economic prosperity to some extent, crashed really, really hard. Joblessness went through the roof. Families were struggling to just put food on their table. In fact, my grandparents tell me stories that there were times where they just didn't eat for days sometimes. My grandma, who was middle class, I think she was probably upper middle class before the Great Depression, would tell me stories of how she was elated when she could have a open face lard and raisin sandwich. This just sounds like disgusting to me now, but this was like a steak dinner to my grandma in the time of the Great Depression. Just think of like a piece of toast with lard, it's animal fat, and then some pieces of raisins on it. That was like a dream for her at this time. Almost all of my grandparents had health issues because they were malnourished during their developmental years. My grandma, who is still alive, she's the last grandparent I have still alive, she has osteoporosis and some other health issues from surviving the Great Depression. And so it was this horrible time. But what it did is it really helped reshape how people, Americans, think about work and value work. Suddenly, nobody deserved a job. You did not deserve a job because you had a college degree or you went to a fancy university. You did not deserve a job because you knew somebody or you're the son of somebody else. A job was a privilege. It was not something that, was just taken lightly, and people worked whatever they could find to put food on the tables for their families. And my grandparents grew up through this time and learned from this. They saw their parents working like this and working anything they could to provide for their family. And so in my grandparents and even in my parents, this really shaped and shifted how they viewed and valued work. Sorry, took a quick water break. My throat got a little dry. So it was because of this, and I think a lot of the sentiments that came from this, that people really began to disdain people that had an entitlement mentality. In fact, my grandparents hate this entitlement mentality because they never had the opportunity to just think that they were owed something or deserved something, because they had to earn every single thing. And this got transferred along down to even my generation and the generation after me, still to this day in America. It's fading, but it's still there, especially with business owners. But kind of this idea that, a university degree, even from a prestigious university, doesn't really mean that much. It shows that, hey, you're smart enough, you should be able to have the skills that can do this job, but it doesn't by nature make you a good employee. That's kind of something else. That's a whole other soapbox I'll go on some other time. But kind of out of this work ethic has grown, because Now people see work as a privilege, and so maybe to an extent they're overworking, but people value work and try to work when they can. And so even for me, when I was a kid, I started working when I was young. It's not uncommon for American parents to give chores or tasks for their kids to do every week, cleaning things and doing things, and they can get paid based on their chores. A lot of kids do not just get paid just because. It's starting to change now, but I almost see a hand-in-hand correlation with entitlement and getting money just because versus working for chores and getting paid based on if you did your chores or not. I started mowing lawns when I could for extra money to save up for things. A lot of girls that I knew that couldn't work yet were babysitting and doing things like that to earn money. That was just a norm. And then I think it's normal for Americans to work in high school. I worked through high school, 20 hours a week, and then I increased in the summertime to earn more money. It's normal to work through college. I worked at least 20 hours a week through most of college. There was one point where I had 2 jobs in college. And that's normal. We really value work, and that's an important piece of kind of American work ethic, work culture. I went to a private school in high school, and even in my private school, the kids who didn't have to work, a lot of the other kids, myself included, kind of saw them as privileged and they didn't really understand the value of money, frankly. And that was from a private school perspective. So let me move on from that. I'm kind of beating a dead horse. What are normal work expectations for an American job? You've probably seen this in movies or heard this, but a 9 to 5 is what we'll call it. It's 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Usually there's a 30-minute lunch break, and there's not usually any other breaks that are often associated with that. There could be smoke breaks or things like that, but kind of what the French have with the coffee break, the afternoon coffee break, the after lunch coffee break, and all of them are 15 to 30 minutes. That does not exist in American work culture, at least to that extent. There might be some industries that are more okay with something like that, but a Frenchman was used to 3 to 4 coffee breaks a day that were all 10 to 20 minutes. He would probably get fired because he didn't seem like he was as efficient with his work. But each job is different. Now that's the norm. There are definitely some exceptions, and so even shift-wise, that 9 to 5 is kind of the average one. But then there's also swing shifts, or late shifts, or night shifts, third shifts, etc. This is a really big one that was really different for me. Is vacation time and holiday time, and hopefully this helps you guys as you interact with your employers to better understand where they're coming from when you're asking for time off, things like that, especially if you're asking for a chunk of time off, is what the norm is in the States. Now this is starting to change a little bit, especially in some industries that have more work remotely or offshore. They're starting to adapt a little bit more to some global standards, but the average, this is still the average. So it's still not at all uncommon for somebody to have only 10 days of vacation their first year when they take an American job. In fact, all of the jobs, I've had a lot of jobs, almost all of the jobs I've had, that has been the case. I cannot think of a job where I started with more than 12 days of vacation my first year. And then normally after that, you'll add a certain amount of days. Normally it's like 5 more days of vacation your second year. But for example, when Jess and I moved to the Florida Keys, she got a job working at a bank. The bank, her first year, and she's not a spring chicken here. She's got job experience. She's a really valuable hire. They gave her 5 days of vacation her first year. She had to either earn the rest or wait until the next year to get some more. That was her first year. So a recent average study I found, this was really fascinating for me. that between somebody working between 10 to 20 years with a company, their average vacation time is 17 to 20 days. This is after you've worked 10 to 20 years with a company. And so I would say, especially historically, this is starting to change a little bit, but it has been very uncommon to get more than 20 days off for vacation in a year. Now that's vacation, that's not including the holidays. We have, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 holiday days, similar to kind of what a Tunisian schedule would be. But a high amount of vacation is very unusual for an American. And so, yeah. Next, we'll hit remote work. This is something that's shifted and changing, and I haven't had my finger on the pulse quite as well, but I'm hearing more from my friends who are business owners and getting their read. And then I'm also just reading a lot of articles on what's going on. And so I can share some anecdotes and kind of what I'm also seeing. Remote work is very split in America. I think in Europe and some places it's much more accepted and people are really excited about it. And I think it's maybe 50-50 on an employer side in the States. Now, this is not to say, they don't see accurately the benefits. There are benefits of not needing people to commute, safer. That saves their employees time and they're happier. But there are also some other drawbacks that I think a lot of employers see, that a lot of employees downplay because they really want remote work. And so my recommendation, if you're asking for remote work or something like that, if your client has said no, don't push the issue, because it's likely they've really been burned by it before, and it's they've already made up their mind. And ultimately you're working for them, and they get to make the call on this. Anecdotally, I'll share. I know some people who own some companies and some people who are upper management in some companies. Most of them really do not like remote work. They found a lot of inefficiencies, people lying with their time or being lazy with their time. There's been kind of a newer problem where people are trying to work 2 jobs at once and they don't do either job well. And so when companies find this out, they get really upset and they are like, okay, no more remote work. But then in addition to that, that's kind of that kind of stuff aside, it does change the company culture. It changes what the company might be trying to accomplish. And so, for example, just being around your coworkers, bouncing ideas off of them, building relationships, that's something that's really hard to do online and virtually. It just doesn't happen to the same level. And that is something that a lot of companies still really value, and they want their employees to be relationally connected in that way. The other thing too is for a lot of companies, it's hard to provide the same kind of benefits and structures of events and things like that if people are always remote, and that's the norm. So there's this range of topics on why remote work is good or bad. And I don't even want to say good or bad, but beneficial or less beneficial. My encouragement to you guys is, just kind of ride with whatever your client has picked. Don't push the issue. Apple has recently been a big company, a tech company even, who has said, hey, we do not want to support remote work. We don't think it's a good idea. If you don't want to work for us anymore, go find something else. And so it's not like all these companies are on board with it and it's the best idea ever. There are a lot of issues with it potentially. So moving on from there, there is kind of a general point I want to hammer on that I think is helpful for understanding kind of the rest of the sections we're going to try to cover. And that is that the general principle or the expectation is that your work will prove your value and your worth in the company. This is how Americans will think about work. You don't take somebody that has no experience and put them in as a manager. They have no way to prove that they are going to do a good job at that yet. That would almost never happen. And so what a lot of American companies like to do is invite them in at entry-level positions that will work them up. And as they earn, as they prove themselves to be entrusted with the simple things, the basic things, they could do those things well with excellence, they say, wow, this person's showing some really great hard work here, and they're, showing leadership, or they're showing critical thinking. Let's give them, the next step up. That's how 90% of American management will think that way. They will want to grow their company and move people up through their systems like that. There are some exceptions where you need to get somebody from the outside and put them in management. Those circumstances exist. It's not impossible. But generally, they're looking for hard work to move people up. Now, for you as offshore and remote employees, this is going to be a little more difficult, mainly because a lot of times the American mindset is there are tons and tons of countries all over the world that are impoverished, and a lot of them are just really happy to have an American job and get paid. And they might not necessarily even be thinking that these people want to move up or have more responsibilities or do something else. They might literally just think they're happy to have this role and get paid and slowly grow with the company. If you have these ambitions of wanting to grow and move up in your company, even as remote and offshore, I would encourage you that you should try to make that more known than you would if you were in person. Letting them know that you're interested is a great way to get recognized and be on top of mind for those open positions. If they don't know that you're interested, they might not ask you. My dad is a really, really great salesman, and this is kind of just an example of somebody who their work has given them opportunities. He's not a pushy salesman. He's friendly. He grows, his sales every year, all that kind of stuff. Companies have literally bought out the company he was working for to get him. And multiple times he's been offered a job of like a regional sales director, which would be it'd be a big step. And my dad has actually turned it down multiple times. And this is something about American culture, and maybe something for you guys to consider as well. He knows that it's not the role he would love. It would require a lot more responsibility, and the pay difference wouldn't be sufficient for the extra hassle and stress and responsibilities. So he would rather just keep doing what he likes doing and take a slightly less salary. And so sometimes that kind of thing happens where you could be really great at a job, you could be a primed candidate to move up, but if you really like your role, it's okay to stay there and just rock it out. But also your work will be part of what gets the attention of people to get a promotion, to move up. So summary, and some of this I said explicitly, some of this I didn't. Your work, your responsibilities that you take on, your efficiency in your work, your effort to put forth your best, all of those things really, really matter in an American work environment. You cannot just be a Miss Marfihit. That concept does not really exist. Actually, I'll kind of get to a part later where this Miss Marfihit mentality is mocked, and we think it's terrible for societies when you have something like that. But again, that's kind of those different systems at play. So the next topic, this is probably everybody's least favorite topic, but one that we should probably cover that hopefully will be helpful, is why employees are let go or transitioned. Why American companies do it so freely. And so, again, we'll kind of go back to the American system, why it's working the way it's working. If there's an American employer and he has a job, he has needs, and it's full-time, he's going to look for somebody who he thinks can fit that role well, right? And so he's going to look and find somebody. If he can find somebody that can do it, he's going to give him the job. If that person can't do the work, especially at the expected level, then he's going to say, hey, this is not working out. This is not helping the company grow, which is ultimately, he might not say this, but it's ultimately not helping the local economy, the regional economy, and the national economy grow. It's actually hurting other people and a country. That sounds really extreme, but that really is what's actually happening in this kind of system. And so it's in the company's best interest, it's in the company's best interest to find somebody who's a better fit for that role. And so because of the system where the small businesses really are the engine for the rest of the economic machine and everybody else's livelihood, everybody else is affected by how well other businesses are doing or are not doing. When the economy and all businesses retract and pull back, it hurts everybody. Where companies are sustained and structured and they can grow and do well, it helps everybody. So for that reason, the work law has given a lot of freedoms for employers. So all the contracts are at will, both on the employer side and the employee side. So the employee can decide, hey, this guy's not going to let me work remote. I would really like to work remote. He is free to say to his employer, you know what, I've loved working with you, but this remote thing really is a break point for me. I'm going to look for another position, or I have another position where I can work remotely. And he's free to do that. At the same time, the employer has that same level of freedom to say, hey, Mr. Billy, you've been bugging me day in, day out about remote work. There's company policies as to why we're not doing it. This is affecting my work and it's stressing me out. I'm going to let you go. And he has the right to do that. It doesn't even have to necessarily be about job performance. Now, there are things where people can get fired on the spot. You see those sometimes in movies. If they bring a weapon to the office or they do something really illegal or something like that, they could get fired on the spot. In most cases, that's not what happens. In most cases, if they have a full-time employee that they're letting go, they're going to let them know what areas of opportunities they have to improve and grow, because it is much, much, much easier to take somebody who's doing most of the job pretty well and bring them up to speed than to replace them. And I know this sounds very theoretical, but I can confirm this is very true. The job hunt, the searching through CVs, the interviews, the cost involved, the onboarding, the getting the employee up to the efficiency and work level and comfortability in the company to be a helpful member is a lot of time and effort and money. And so if you've got somebody who is doing 80% of the role pretty well and 20% he's kind of making some mistakes on, it's easier to coach them on that 20%. Now, after they've talked to them about a couple things, or if there's some serious issues that have been addressed that are still not getting corrected, then the employer might say, hey, I got 100 people waiting at this door who like this job. This guy's just not really making the improvements we need him to make. Let's make the change. But I want to encourage you guys and help you see from an employer standpoint, it is much easier, and employers will almost always keep somebody who's doing the job well or decently than just replace them really quickly and flippantly. There's a lot of time cost and money cost that goes right out the window when you have a high turnover. And so most employers are not trying to have high turnover. They do not want that. But they are trying to have this balance of somebody that can do the job, the tasks efficiently at the level that they need them to do it at. And so my encouragement for you guys is to kind of consider this, kind of all of these points that I've kind of shared recently is, if you're afraid of getting let go, are you doing your job well? Have you been changed? Have you changed the areas that were weaknesses? Have you been working on them? Have you been addressing them? If somebody was like, hey, you're always sending this report late, or you're always clocking in late, this is an issue. It really needs to get addressed and fixed. Have you addressed that and fixed that? If you haven't, then you might be like, there are some reasons I have not been doing my job well. And I love you guys. I love doing what we're doing, but I cannot stress enough that there are a lot of people who would eagerly take these jobs. It's not super hard to find replacements for some of the positions. And so if you're just trying to chill and do the bare minimum, it might not be a good fit for you. Americans do expect a level of work that is productive, that's efficient. In their minds, they already know what that level is. If they've been working in an industry for a while, they already have those benchmarks. You could Google them. If you're not really sure what that looks like internationally or globally, look it up. You can Google it. How long does it take to write an average blog? How long does it take to create some social media posts? How long does it take to edit a website? How long does it take to build this kind of program? All those kinds of things are things you could look up and see. This is what the global averages are. If you guys work hard, do your best, try to deliver excellence, I think that American employers will be really happy with you guys. When you're looking for opportunities to not work and to slack off, then yeah, anybody, even in the States, should kind of be scared for their job, because you're literally not working, but you're getting paid for the work. That doesn't jive, especially in American businesses. And I'll encourage you guys again, like I've encouraged many, if you have times where you have downtime, the thing that your employer will expect you to do is to write your supervisor or write your project manager or write somebody and say, hey, I wrapped up my tasks. What else have you got for me? What else can I be doing? If they don't have anything for you, I don't think it's wrong to take a quick break. But what I would be doing, especially if you want to grow in your job, is think about what else can I be doing that I will have to do later, or ways that I could be growing my company or making my work easier or better for the future. And doing some of those things. If you kind of just take it as a time to pause and wait, it's probably not a good thing. Kind of to give perspective, I guess, on from somebody coming from this kind of system, the American work system versus another system. So I'll use the Tunisian system for example. Seeing the mismatfi heat and the phenomena of that, because of the way work is handled and is addressed and is thought of, we kind of naturally critique companies or societies that overly help or overly protect employees. And when we see that kind of mismatfi heat mentality, we're like, yeah, this is the result. This is the natural result. And maybe that's really cocky and pompous, but we see it as a one-to-one correlation, and that might not be necessarily the case. And there's probably a lot of other things that I just don't understand about the system. This is why I'm more critical maybe than the average person, but I have seen the benefit of, if people want to work, giving them the most opportunity to flourish and thrive and grow and expand, and giving that opportunity to people who want to work. And people who don't want to work don't get those same opportunities. And in my opinion, and I think this is how most Americans would think, that's okay. Work is work. That's the best way I could describe it. Work is not always fun. Even the things that you love a lot sometimes feel hard or are not fun. And that's just the nature of the beast. But it's the way that we earn a living. It's the way that we earn an income. And it's really your foundational step for building to retirement, building to financial freedom, building to have a more extravagant lifestyle in the future, if that's what you really want. It all starts with work. Unless you're coming from a really, really wealthy family, work is always how you get there. And so, we want to help give you guys the most opportunity that we can. We want to give you the most room for success here. We want to help you guys thrive and succeed in your roles. So please let us know what we can be doing to help you guys do better at Qore here. Hopefully this was informative and helpful to understand, like I said, how Americans think about work and work ethic. And yeah. So what does this mean for you as a Qore employee? Well, you luckily are employed by probably two clients, two companies. You're employed by us, first and foremost, and then kind of by passive nature, our client. And so if you are let go by our client for whatever reason, they might have good reasons, they might have bad reasons, it will then fall to us to then decide what we will do with you. And so, in most cases, I would say 99.99% of the cases, if you are a good employee, you've showed good work ethic, both internally with Qore, but then also through what we've seen with your client, we will try really, really hard to find you another client as fast as possible. We don't want to lose good employees. This is also kind of how American businessmen and businesses think. Really good employees are hard to come by, and they're much easier to save. And so what we will do is give you a month where we'll hopefully have some maybe internal things you can kind of help us with, or maybe you can do some trainings to kind of further your professional skills in one way or another. And in that time period, we'll do an extra focus on finding a good fit for you with another client. If after that month period we cannot find a good fit for you, you can go furloughed, which basically we will keep looking for you. We really do not want to lose a really solid person. But after that month, after the termination with the client, you will go furloughed, and so you'll just keep some of the very basic benefits, but you will not have your salary at that point. And so what we really want to do is give you an extra layer of cushion than you would have with any other freelance contract or employer, in that if we see your value, if we see that you're actually working well, if we disagree with your employer, maybe they're letting you go for something, but we actually see, no, you actually are working really hard and putting in the effort, we want to do our part to keep you and help you. And so hopefully, from the Qore perspective, you see we're trying to make it better and easier for you, even than if you were just freelancing on your own or working for one company. So what that could look like, let's just give an example. Let's say your client has a conversation with you, it gets misinterpreted or something and doesn't get addressed, and then they let you go. All right, you've got a month from that day where you're still full-time with Qore, you're still working with us. If we've got tasks, we'll give them to you. If we don't really have tasks for you, you can work on doing some professional development, learning some skills or developing your skills. And that month, we're looking for you for another client. After that, like I said, you would then roll into being furloughed, and that would last 2 months, where you would receive just some of the basic benefits. You could still be part of the team events, team buildings, professional developments, things like that. But you would not have the requirements of coming to the office or the requirements of being a full-time employee at Qore. And in those times, we're really looking to find another suitable, good client for you to continue our relationship and continue your employment with us. If by the end of those 2 months we cannot find a really good fit for you, then we would transition to laying you off, probably very regrettably. And that's for the case of the person where we see high value and we want to keep you on. If your employer lets you go and you have not really proven to be a really good fit for us, or we kind of agree with your employer, there's some maybe character issues or skill issues that make the employment in that sector really difficult, or something along those lines, then we have the potential to also let you go as well. Now that would only be in the case of somebody that we really did not feel like was up to snuff, or there were some other issues at play that were issues that we would let you go for. Maybe there's some stuff internally that we've already discussed with you or something along those lines. But I want to encourage you guys, if you guys are doing your job well and you're working hard, and we're seeing that, we want to keep you. We want people like you. If you're talented at what you're doing and you even can do more and improve, Jihen and I and Siwa are seeing that, and we want to, like I said, we want to keep people like you who want to work, who want to move up, who want to work hard. And so I just want to encourage you with that. Hopefully that's encouraging to hear that you kind of have this extra layer of protection, that even after if your client decides to move on for whatever reason, we'll do our best to keep you, find another client, and you'll even get paid for a month of whether we have a lot of work for you or a little work for you. If you guys have some questions, feel free to Slack or if you think it would be helpful for like a public question, you put it in the team Slack even, and I can answer it publicly. If it's a private question, you can ask me privately. I'm an open book. I'm happy to share anything. If you have personal questions, you're welcome to ask me as well. But I just want to give you guys this information so that some of the fears or some of the questions about what is expected is kind of put out there. Hopefully the expectation is exactly what you thought it was. 40 hours a week for full-time work, and those 40 hours you're working, and the expectation is you're trying to do your best. And I think for all of you guys were hired because we believed you could do the role well, and the client thought you could do the role well. And I really think if you're putting out your best for 40 hours a week, they'll be satisfied. So I want to encourage you guys with that, leave you with that. Like I said, if you got questions, feel free to ask, either I or Jen. And hopefully next time we can do this professional development in person.